So, like, does that interrupt the validity of her claim that she had the Son of God?
Okay, good question. Obviously, Mary could have been lying. Obviously, she could have had sex with somebody else and had a baby. That's possible. The reason that I am convinced that she was a virgin is because that is what Jesus held to. It's what those who knew Christ, the eyewitnesses, held to. And the evidence is that Jesus was really in touch with reality. What's the evidence?
It's because you pray to a God that, it's like that sickness or the illness, or whether you believe it's just the statistical chance that your body itself is able to heal itself and repair itself to be that way.
Yep.
Do you think maybe then that miracles would have to be even more exceptionally unable to happen? Maybe something that, like you said, it's an actual bend of the natural law rather than just a very unlikely statistic?
Okay, Gabriel, I think you're putting your hand on exactly the reason why I would never say the reason that I believe God exists is because I got healed of cancer. The reason I think God exists is because my buddy got healed of cancer. Right. No, I don't do that. Instead, because of the statistical possibility. Instead, what I say is the evidence of order and design, the evidence of love, the evidence of densely packed information in the DNA of a single cell, demanding an intelligent mind, the evidence of the human longing for meaning in life. And if there is no God, life is ultimately meaningless, but it's interesting. We're all hardwired, clearly, to understand our meaning and purpose in life. That kind of evidence convinces me that there is a God. The fact that none of my atheist friends can live out their atheism consistently convinces me that atheism is wrong. I mean, they're a very nice, polite guy before you. I pointed out to him, you cannot live out your moral relativism. I mean, how many students are there here at this fine university who are committed to moral relativism? A lot, right?
Right.
Now that's fine if you want to sleep around with whoever. But when it comes to children being abused, when it comes to a guy shooting people out of a hotel room in Las Vegas, all of a sudden my moral relativist friends turn into moral absolutists. And I can promise you, when it comes to racism and sexism, a ton of my moral relativist friends turn into moral absolutists like that. Don't you dare be racist. Don't you dare be sexist. That is absolutely evil. Bravo, I agree. But now guess what you've just done? You've either parted company with your brain or you've parted company with your moral relativism. Because you're telling me that sexism and racism are absolutely wrong. Good, I agree. Question is, why? And the point is, if you're an atheist and if you believe in moral relativism, you have no basis of saying that anything is absolutely wrong. It's not absolutely wrong, guys. It's relatively wrong, depending upon whether you're a liberal, educated person or whether you're part of the KKK. And just face reality, friends. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I think in a big sense, cultural elements kind of play a big role in that. For example, there are many countries that sexism isn't anything that's deemed evil or bad necessarily, and even in those religions who practice religion in those cultures, they still, don't deem that as a bad moral code.
Good. That's my exact point. So if a whole culture says gassing Jews is right, I am convinced the whole culture is wrong. And if the whole culture says date rape is good, I am convinced the whole culture is wrong. And if anybody says to me, there you go with your white Christian view, I would encourage you to check out the writings of Layman Sana, professor at Yale, who is from West Africa. He is totally African. He's a professor at Yale. And one of his main points is, if you tell me that Africans believe in Jesus, in the millions that do, because of some colonialism, because of some rape of culture, you are out to lunch. Africans believe in Jesus because Jesus affirms their Africanness. This has nothing to do with culture. And when Africans believe in Jesus, they are not believing in the great white European way. They are believing in the first century Palestinian Jew, Jesus of Nazareth, who was more than a man. He was God in human form. And when Africans put their faith in Jesus, he makes them more African. He doesn't make them more European. And he says, that's why I and my fellow African believers accept Christ. Because we notice he is not calling us to be white, Enlightenment, European people. He's calling us to be Africans with a strong understanding of ethics, with a strong understanding of the supernatural, that there are evil spirits and good spirits, and there's a good God and there's a Satan. And you stinking white, liberal, enlightened secularists, you're out to lunch. And it's you who will try to impose your secularism on us Africans, and we're not going to swallow it. Because it is your culture, and it's your whiteness. He's a fascinating guy. Check him out. Lamin Sana, professor at Yale.
I think that's it for us.
Guys, you've been awesome. Thank you both so much.
Yeah.
Privilege meeting you and talking with you. Thank you so much. Somebody else have an issue they want to raise? To what degree is the Bible correct on factual issues?
Or to rephrase, is it incorrect on any issues?
Is it incorrect? All right. There are between 200 and 400,000 manuscript variants for the New Testament in the manuscripts that we have from the 1st century through the 10th century. But those manuscript variants are so small on such inconsequential issues that we have an incredibly high degree of accuracy in the New Testament. But, for instance, I'll give you an example. John chapter 8, verses 1 through 11, Jesus encountering the woman caught in the act of adultery, is not in some of the earliest Greek manuscripts. So, whether that exact event took place, where Jesus doesn't condemn the woman caught in the act of adultery, I'm not sure. So you see, that's why it's a little difficult to answer your question precisely how accurate is it. It's very accurate, but is there a degree of precision that some people would want? No. There's not a degree of precision that some people would want.
Okay. Does the Bible differ on more consequential issues, such as whether or not reproduction is something that is faithful, or whether or not homosexuality is something that is sinful? Is there any ambiguity there?
There's absolutely no ambiguity in the Bible on whether homosexual practice of homosexual sex is wrong, or whether the practice of adultery, or whether the practice of premarital sex is wrong. It's unequivocally clear.
Okay, is it okay if I read you some quotes from the Bible?
Sure.
Okay, cool. The first is from Genesis, chapter 1:28.
You bet.
The quote is, God encourages reproduction.
Yeah.
The second is from LE, chapter 12, 1-8. God requires purification rites following childbirth, which in effect makes childbirth a sin. Those seem to directly contradict each other, and I can't find an explanation as to why.
It's real simple. You're not quoting the Bible. Never in Leviticus does it say that reproduction is a sin. It does talk about purification. Pardon?
I'm reading straight.
Okay, what is the verse?
It's God requires purification rites following childbirth, which in effect makes childbirth a sin.
And you're telling me that that's a direct quote from Leviticus what?
Leviticus chapter 12, 1-8.
Leviticus chapter 12, verses 1-8. The Lord said to Moses, say to the Israelites, a woman who becomes pregnant and gives birth to a son will be ceremonially unclean for 7 days, just as she is unclean during her monthly period. On the 8th day, the boy is to be circumcised. Then the woman must wait 33 days to be purified from her bleeding. She must not touch anything sacred or go to the sanctuary until the days of her purification are over. If she gives birth to a daughter for 2 weeks, the woman will be unclean, as during her period. Then she must wait 66 days to be purified from her bleeding. When the days of her purification for a son or daughter are over, she is to bring to the priest at the entrance of the tent of meeting a year-old lamb for a burnt offering, and a young pigeon or a dove for a sin offering. He shall offer them before the Lord to make atonement for her, and then she will be ceremonially clean from her flow of blood. These are the regulations for the woman who gives birth to a boy or a girl. If she cannot afford a lamb, she is to bring 2 doves or 2 pigeons, one for a burnt offering and the other for a sin offering. In this way, the priest will make atonement for her, and she will be clean.
Okay, I'm not sure what version of the Bible you have, but I mean, that's fine.
No, it's not fine. Whatever you're reading there is embarrassing. The Bible never says that, and for you to think that the Bible contradicts itself and to use something like that, sir, that's embarrassing.
I mean, this is from BibleGateway.com, so...
What translation does it say?
It's from the...
Because that's a summary you read. That's
no,
that's not a verse.
It's from the King James Version of the Bible.
That's not the KJV.
So the King James would never use that type of language.
Okay, well, that's fine. I mean, does the Bible directly contradict itself on more factual issues such as the nature of, like, when the sun came to be, those kind of things? Can I read you quotes that imply that they do?
Sure.
Cool. From Genesis chapter 1, 11 to 12, it says, trees were created before man was created. From Genesis chapter 2, 4 to 9, it says man was created before trees were created.
Oh. Have you ever heard of a literary device called flashback?
Yes.
Have you ever seen it in a movie or read it in a book?
Yes.
Obviously, in Genesis 2, the device of flashback is being used very clearly. Why? Because it starts with the creation of man. Obviously, human beings were not created before trees and grass and the sun. That's the first point. The second point is, if you think that you can take a Hebrew poem, which is what Genesis 1 is, and treat it as you would a science textbook, that's basic intellectual dishonesty.
So you're saying that some things which are in the Genesis are to be treated as poems and not facts? Then how do you differ between what is a poem and what is a fact?
Good question. And if you can't find an answer to that question, you will flunk poetry versus biology at the University of Texas.
It seems a little arbitrary.
Arbitrary?
To the reader to determine what is true and what isn't.
Arbitrary. Is it arbitrary for the University of Texas to demand that if you don't go into literature class and understand what a poem is and interpret a poem as a poem, and then you go into biology class and you better interpret a biology textbook as a science textbook? Is that arbitrary for the University of Texas to ask you to learn to do that?
No, that's not arbitrary. Because
Good.
Going into literature class, you're told it's a poem beforehand, but I don't think the Genesis distinguishes between this is a poem and this is a fact.
Oh, really?
Does it start with this?
So Shakespeare begins his Macbeth with a statement that, be careful, this is not science, this is a play?
I mean...
No. You had better learn to respect literary style, literary genre, and the author's not going to have the first line say, this is science, this is poetry, this is epic poetry. You think Homer did that with the Iliad and the Odyssey? This is an epic poem, guys. Read it like that. No. Instead, you guys, if you're going to ask these types of questions, it's great that you ask them, but you're going to have to go back and do your homework, which means you're going to have to study the difference between epic poem, science, mythology, legend, historical narrative, parable, hyperbole, metaphor, simile. And if you're going to ask these questions, bravo, please continue to ask them, but you got your homework cut out for you. Go and study literary genre, and you better learn to distinguish between the different styles. Otherwise, you're going to get in trouble real fast. Right?
Sure.
Good.
How can you explain the existence of God physically?
How do you explain the existence of God physically? The same way I explain the existence of justice physically. The same way I express the experience of love physically. I would never try to. That would be idiocy. Love is not a physical thing. It's a value. It's unseen. Therefore, it would be stupid for me to say, here's a foot of love. Here's a pound of love. You want to weigh it? It'd be stupid. Okay. The same way I would say, your friendship, your trust, your loyalty, I can't give you a pound of that or a foot of that. It'd be stupid for me to think that I could physically show you friendship or trust, right?
Sure, but values like justice and morality seem to be personal to the individual in that they're subjective in nature, whereas you're implying that God exists objectively for everyone.
Okay, I disagree.
And so while it is true that you cannot explain justice and morality, the way you are articulating Christianity to be true in a more objective manner, you should be able to explain it.
Okay. You and I have a big disagreement. Anybody rapes that woman, I'm going to tell that guy that's evil. Objectively evil. Not subjectively. Not, this is my taste. It's not cool to rape today because it's November 13th. 14th, 15th, you do whatever you want, but today, no rape. Baloney. I am committed to the value of justice based on the value of the individual, and the only way that can be real is if there is some God who created a human being, all of us, with intrinsic value, and created a value of justice that I cannot show you a foot of or a pound of.
Or there's a difference between ethics and religion.
Yeah, well,
I mean, I think we can all agree murder is bad, but not because God says so. Like, if God
why
said
is murder bad?
If God said in the Bible that rape was something that is inherently good, yet I disagree, would that mean that I'm wrong?
Well, obviously I am arguing for objective morality exists, point one. Point two, the only way objective morality can exist is if there is some type of God. Point three, because objective morality exists, therefore God exists. That's all I'm saying. Hi, my name's Cliff. What's your name?
Gabriel.
Harry?
Gabriel.
Tom.
Gabriel.
It's a test, something.
Okay, good. You're right. Okay, not only am I being rude to you, Gabriel, I'm being incredibly arrogant. I think I know your name better than you do.
Okay.
What a joke, right? What a total farce. The only way I'm going to have the privilege of getting to know Gabriel is if Gabriel opens up and tells me the truth. If you're silent, or if you play games with my head, I'm never going to have the privilege of knowing Gabriel. If that's true between Gabriel and Cliff, how much more that is true between God and Cliff? I'm not smart enough to figure out Gabriel, and I'm definitely not smart enough to figure out God. I depend on Gabriel to open up and tell me the truth about Gabriel. I depend upon God to open up and tell me the truth about who on earth or in heaven is God. That's where Jesus, Muhammad, the avatars, Shirley MacLaine come into the picture. They all claim to be revealing God accurately. But the problem is they contradict each other. It's as if you said, my name's Gabriel, and the next sentence you says, I'm really Tom. You're contradicting yourself. So, the question is, are Jesus, Muhammad, the avatars, Siddhartha Gautama, all wrong, or is one of them right? Because they contradict each other, they can't all be right. That's where evidence kicks in. You got to read the teachings of Buddha. You got to read the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, and figure out Hinduism. You got to read the Quran and find out about Muhammad. And I'm standing here saying, please read the New Testament Gospels and figure out, does the evidence point to Jesus Christ being reliable, or does it not? Does that make any sense?
In the sense that those other texts aren't as reliable, like they don't have as much evidence or as much proof or as much validity behind them as the Bible? Is that what you're trying to get to?
No, very good. Very good question. No, sir. I think the evidence is the Quran, the teachings of Siddhartha Gautama Buddha, the Vedas and Upanishads are all very accurate. Now read them. Because the question is Muhammad reliable or is Jesus reliable? And although they agree on many points, they contradict each other on other points. So they both can't be true.
So do you just pick one and hope it's right?
No, you gotta study. I'm sorry, I can't do this homework for you. You gotta study.
You're saying there's some points that are, I guess, accepted amongst like all disciples or whatever they were, the teachers, but then you're saying there's some that contradict?
Yes.
So are you saying, okay, would those contradictions be a different interpretation of what the God is supposed to be relaying through them? Or do you think that's like a personal bias in the sense of their personal interpretation of what it's supposed to be and the way they relay it kind of...
Great question. All right, we'll put it right out in front. In the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Jesus claims to be more than a man. He claims to be God in human form. In the Quran, Muhammad repeatedly says, Jesus is not God. So who is he? Is Jesus God in human form, or is he just a good prophet the way the Quran teaches? That's a contradiction. Are we all agree on that?
Is that a contradiction?
Jesus is not God. Jesus is God. That's a contradiction. They both can't be right. Either Jesus is not God or he is God. Second point, which gets to your question, which was excellent. Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, and cultural Christianity in the wonderful nation of Texas. All of these teach, do good, and then God owes you. Do good, pile up good karma, and you'll get a better next reincarnation. Be a good old boy. Be a nice lady. And then God owes you. Jesus Christ contradicts all of that. Jesus says, I bled and died on a cross to give you forgiveness, grace, the gift of eternal life, which contradicts the idea you do a bunch of good and then God owes you heaven, nirvana, whatever. You see, so that's a fundamental contradiction.
So if you've never been exposed to, if you live in a remote part of the world, you've never been exposed to Christianity, the teachings of the gospel, then how do you get to heaven?
Good question. I do not know. Why? Because Jesus never specifically answered the question, so I can't make an answer up.
Yeah.
But he makes 5 points that apply to your excellent question. First point, God's character is just, which means nobody's getting ripped off. God is just. Second point, nobody goes to hell because of ignorance. Nobody goes to hell because they were born in a part of the world where they never heard about Jesus. The only reason people go to hell is because they choose to live their life separate from God. And God grants their request and they'll spend eternity separate from Him because they chose to live their life separate from Him. Thirdly, there are going to be a boatload of people in heaven who never heard about Jesus. Hebrews chapter 11 in the New Testament lists some of these people. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Rahab, a Gentile prostitute, obviously never heard about Jesus. They were born hundreds of years before him. But in humility, they put their faith in God. God, I don't know how you're going to do it, but I'm trusting you. Fourth point, the only reason those people are going to be in heaven is because Jesus bled and died on a cross for their sin. Nobody's going to be in heaven, according to Christ, because they did enough good, so God owes them. Remember, that's a contradiction between Jesus and every major world religion. Fifthly and finally, although I do not know how God will judge those who've never heard about Christ, I do know that all of us here have more than ample opportunity to read the Gospels. We are responsible for what we do with Jesus. Yes.
Between the religions, I guess, because it seems to me like it's very centered around Jesus Christ, I guess. Anything that kind of, goes against Him, you've kind of been labeling as something that can't coincide with Catholicism or Christianity just because of Him. Even like, what if other, like, more than 2 or 3 religions have the same belief, I guess, but that one belief goes against that belief in Jesus and Christianity and Catholicism, even though it's only one religion standing against it? It seems to me you just kind of put that at the center of it rather than kind of give it all an equal chance, I guess, in the form of the contradictions that you were explaining.
Okay, good. Okay, I think you're asking a very deep question epistemologically in terms of know how do you know something, all right? Does my imagination define truth? No, good. Okay, because there are a lot of people in this culture who say, yes, it does. You will often hear the statement, perception defines reality.
The Thomas theorem, in a sense, yeah.
Yeah, that's baloney, right? If my perception is you're not standing here, my perception is wrong. Because in reality, you are standing here.
But your perception is that I am standing here.
Right. So the question is there enough evidence to support that my eyesight tells me the truth about reality, or is there not enough evidence to support my eyesight telling me the truth about reality? And I would argue there's more than enough evidence that my eyesight helps me pick up on reality than that my eyesight lies to me. That's why I trust my eyesight the way I do. So you see, I am convinced that reality exists separate from my imagination, from my perception, from my belief. Back to my first illustration to you. And please don't forget that one. If I believe that you're Tom, it doesn't make me right. In reality, you are Gabriel. You're not Tom. And if I go around calling you Tom, I'm probably rude, arrogant, but I also just might be totally out of touch with reality. Smoking something you don't want to smoke. Okay? So, the same thing is true with God. If it's true with Gabriel, I can promise you it's true with God. If God is real, then God is a certain way. Unless God is impersonal. If God is impersonal, then it really doesn't matter what I believe about God. God's just an impersonal it. But if God actually loves you, then it does matter what you think about God. Because if God loves you, it means He's personal. He's not a fantasy. There's a he that actually cares about Gabriel. Now, if that's true, then Gabriel's got to figure out, how am I going to respond to this personal being, God, who actually claims he loves me and wants me to go to heaven and spend eternity with him? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess that like is a valid answer to our question. And then we had our second question, kind of again, I guess another like question of validity would be, I guess you want to.
Yeah, it's not meant to be silly or anything, but like, in the sense of other life forms, I guess, you know.
Yeah.
My question was, did God only create this one Earth with this one like sphere of life, and only this is it? Or like, is there a belief that in the universe, you know, there's different worlds with different life forms and also intelligent life elsewhere with the same conscience that has to apply with the same moral code, that has to apply with the same kind of rules that religion governs? Or is this kind of like the only thing there is?
Okay, good. I do not know from the Bible if God has created other intelligent life forms. So once again, I'd be lying to you if I said, well, according to Christ in the Bible, yes or no. Doesn't say. So therefore, I turn to science to ask, what's the evidence that there's other intelligent life in this universe? And to date, I have no evidence there is, but if there's a discovery tomorrow, I'll celebrate that discovery.
So you're saying that like the rules set out that govern Christianity would apply to a new life form on any planet in any galaxy?
Well, I don't know, because Jesus in the Bible never addressed the question. So I can't honestly tell you.
In your opinion, would it strengthen or weaken the argument of religion if there were other life forms found on other planets, stuff like that? Not just necessarily like life form, like very simple, but maybe a higher intelligent like life being, you know? Would that, in your opinion, strengthen or weaken the argument around religion?
Fascinating question. I do not know. I mean, it is. You know, start talking about extraterrestrial life, and because I have so little evidence, I don't know how to think that one through, to be honest with you.
So that would be a dilemma, like if there was life found on another planet, that would be a dilemma for the church to figure out.
And not necessarily just like finding it, but maybe like if they were to be studied, you notice that they don't necessarily follow the code of morals that we do, or necessarily even the same customs. So it's a very big disparity between the way we live life and the way that would live life, you know? So would that still kind of create the ubiquity that religion is supposed to encompass all of the universe and all of life? Or would it weaken that argument that, you know, God is kind of like all powerful and surrounds all life and all creation, when two separate beings follow so like different codes of life?
Okay, in one sense, I think it would be fascinating to think that one through. Okay? But in another sense, at this point today, I feel it's totally irrelevant to your life, to my life today. See, for me, I think that would be an example of playing intellectual gymnastics.
Right, I get that it's very like a big hypothetical, you know.
Right.
No big basis to kind of like start jumping to that conclusion.
Right.
But at the same sense, it's kind of based on that faith belief that you were talking about earlier, of like the faith of like believing there might be something of the same type of order thinking that we have, in the same way that you have faith in the belief that way back then there was a resurrection of somebody of the same higher order thinking that we had, somebody mortal, but in the sense he was also partly God, correct? So he was himself immortal in that sense.
Okay. I am convinced that there is an eternal being, God. I'm convinced that there's only one. So yes, if I discovered other life on other planets, I would be interested in understanding their awareness of God's existence as the creator.
Okay. I get what you're saying. So I guess it comes down to, it's just too hypothetical of an answer, and then it comes down to opinion of like how you would handle that hypothetically. So I guess we'll move on to the third question. Okay, so our third question was kind of like a logic one that I had grown up with and never really made sense to me, but we were talking about the Virgin Mary and like how do Christians answer when people say like is the Virgin Mary completely valid because she was claiming to be a virgin and like God had sent Jesus to her, but could she have been lying about that?
Sure, she could have been lying about it.
So, like, does that interrupt the validity of her claim that she had the Son of God?
Okay, good question. Obviously, Mary could have been lying. Obviously, she could have had sex with somebody else and had a baby. That's possible. The reason that I am convinced that she was a virgin is because that is what Jesus held to. It's what those who knew Christ, the eyewitnesses, held to. And the evidence is that Jesus was really in touch with reality. What's the evidence? Bottom line, it's real simple. Gabriel, if you die and rise from the dead, I promise to listen very carefully to absolutely everything you have to say. If you die and rise from the dead, the overwhelming evidence is you got a handle on reality like nobody else. So if you tell me you were born of a virgin after you rise from the dead, I'll trust that.
Do you think it's a little too illogical maybe to follow maybe a big phenomenon that has never occurred or been observed, especially like back way in those times where maybe there wasn't so much study about kind of like the function of life and the way it works? And do you think it was a little misleading to follow that one big phenomenon and whatever stemmed out of that to just believe what it like said to be just because of the I guess the circumstances of the extreme happening just once?
You bet. Okay, if atheism is true, there is no God, then obviously a virgin birth is stupidity. But you see, what an atheist is doing is they're limiting reality. They're saying all of reality is matter and energy, and therefore there is no supernatural hand that can extend out and change a law of nature and perform what you and I call a miracle. I instead, as a theist, say, no, the evidence is there is God. Therefore, what's a miracle? A miracle is the Creator who put together the natural laws, reaching in, changing what you and I know to be a natural law, and performing what you and I call a miracle.